And let's see, it says we are live. So I am taking that we are live, and it is good to be alive, as they would say. So welcome, everybody. It is Monday. And if you ever watch the movie Office, well, it's Monday. I see now I'm hearing myself. Okay.
That was me hitting the catching the mute button because I'm monitoring the show, obviously, on YouTube.
Okay, good. So are we 5 by 5?
Yes, we are. They heard it's Monday, and that's where the stream started for me.
All right. So yeah, welcome everybody, as they would say. So good to see you. The movie Office Space. I always loved that movie because it had the famous line, well, this just feels like a Monday. An M-U-N day, you know. I don't know about that, but hey, I'm speaking favor over us all because it's damn good to be here. The alternative, Steve, is that we would be in the ether world, so to speak, and so we get to be amongst the so-called living dead, and it's a groovy party down here. So everyone, speaking favor, be of service to others, and happy birthday if you got one, and always happy to talk about that. We are prospering. And Steve, right before I get to you, a little bit of house cleaning. Not house cleaning. As you know, on Friday, Judy asked us all to just keep her dad in mind, send him healing thoughts and energy. Well, I'm happy to say he made his transition yesterday. Judy wrote me and said to tell everyone thank you. And here's the interesting thing. She said he passed. She didn't even know he was gone. It was so peaceful that she wasn't even aware that he had left the building. So Charles is on his way, part of the journey. I guess he met Bob Saget out there. You know, seemed like they were kind of passing at the same time. What a great time to pass if you got a comedian right next to you, Steve. I mean, come on. He can tell you jokes all the way through the process.
Right.
But Judy, we love you. And
especially Saget jokes, dear God.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and listen, you know, I loved his shows, America's Funniest Videos. I mean, come on. Some of that stuff was really funny.
Yeah.
It was. So anyway, so good to see everybody. Welcome all the moderators and all the rest of the Soul Tribe fam. I see Nina, Gaia, Robert V is in the house, Deborah Sloan, Thomas, Beloved Abstract. Beloved Abstract gets in here really early. If y'all want to have a good conversation, he's always around. Suzanne's in, Carlton, how you doing? Miko, a lot of new people in here. Gaia, much love to you and Paul. Going to get you guys on here. So anyway, Steve, haven't had you on a little bit. So how has the journey been since the last time we've seen each other? I see. Where is the co-pilot? There he is.
He's right there.
There he is. Guess he's giving us the idea. It's like, okay.
Right. Yeah. No, it's been oh man, it's been something else. I've talked so much about, you know, like I share a lot of, you know, things like there's personal vlogging on top of like more professional type of presentations on my channel. So, you know, I mean, like, you know, that gets everybody there when it comes to me and who I am, etc., where I'm at, you know. So it's been a rough 2 years. You know, I held a job a couple months ago for about 2 weeks and at a horse stable. And I was feeling really happy about that. You know, something I was familiar with from my time as a childhood with my grandfather around horses. And then, like, you know, sixth day on the job in the second week, they just, you know, they dropped the jab question, and I told them I'll give them 24 hours to think about it. And this was not a corporate decision; this was a personal decision because the owner of the stable's husband, she believes COVID took her husband's lung. Excuse me for dropping the word. Sorry. But anyway, point is, you know, deep down inside, how do you tell someone, well, no, that was their fault, not this thing they made up. Like you can't do that, right? Not, like it's not truth or grandstanding. It's like I need a job. How do I make you feel safe with me being a natural pureblood, right? that's kind of like what it's about. It's just like, what about me and my personal whatever? So I had to walk away from a job that was going to make me $300 a week and start getting me on my feet, and I was pretty happy with it, even with the early hours it was asking me to start. And then it just like that, it was done. So yeah, so it's been that's been the most upsetting thing going on in my universe. Other than that, everything's been okay.
It's kind of like the detective, the guy that jumped off the 10-story building. He was talking to the woman on the 3rd floor, and he said, "Well, did you hear anything? Possibly as he was falling past your window?" And she said, "Yeah, I did." She said, detective said, "Well, what?" She said, "Well, I heard him say, 'So far, so good.'" So
it's
just
it's like in the Doctor
where you are in the fall.
I've been falling for 30 minutes.
It's one of those things that we live today in a culture that is, unfortunately, it's just becoming very divided. It looks like we're almost, as a species, looking for an excuse. And it kind of brings this whole conversation into point. So, it seems to be becoming much more afresh in people's curiosity. Those who are seeking, what did or did not happen, was this kingdom called Tatari. And, my wife and I, well-versed, well-read, educated, and we never heard anything called Tatari growing up, never read it in our history books, never saw anything referenced to it at all, not even in religion. And yet, Steve, there is clear evidence that there was a kingdom of Tatari. 2, there were I don't know how you would say it. I don't think they were subjects. I don't even think they were citizens. They were a part of this kingdom called Tartarians. And it is also documented that a part of the Tartarian culture and race was they were also called behemoths, giants. They had the gargantuan gene. As I've gone a little deeper, it's very interesting because this particular genus of man seemed to carry that gene more prominent in them than in other races around the world.
Right. And you have to remember, there's always that thing that they say, allegedly it's scientifically true, that you can't meet a Mongolian person that isn't related to Genghis Khan, the original Khan, because of the amount of copulation he would have with his conquested women.
I mean, he had the early Woodstock before we even knew anything about a love fest.
Right, exactly.
I guess that dude was trying to put Solomon, said, "Man, I left you far behind."
Yeah. So when you talk about Tartary as this great like empire or whatever, right? The word kind of throws in the catch-all. I just mentioned Mongolian because effectively that's what they did, is that they kind of oversimplified Mongolian history, because we used to call the Mongolians the Tartars because there was a Tatar tribe of Mongolia that apparently was getting out there, almost, and they almost became like the emissarial kind of name, right? So the Mongolian Empire, like we all know the reach of the Mongolian Empire. You can look at it in maps from its various heights towards its very end or whatever.
Define China.
But just like any nation, they're going to have embassies. So I think all these places where we've discovered the Tartarian flag that are not in the Mongolian region, I think that those were either embassies, or maybe they didn't even really need to have embassies necessarily, but just some sort of building where a Tartarian was allowed to set up shop for something, and it was all on the level or whatever, right? And so they were they just had a reach and an influence, and we called them the Tartarians when they referred to themselves as the Mongolians, is the basic understanding of where all that comes from, right? And they were a Buddhist empire. And so they're sitting there, and I came to realize it wasn't Tartaria, it was the Mongolian Empire, and then there were three empires basically running the entire world at that time. Just three. It was the Mongolians.
Now,
And
what place in the chronology are we talking in history here, supposedly?
honestly, this isn't even changing the history. Like, history is often a lie of omission. And I'm looking at the Mongolian history, and I can fill in the gaps. And then also, like, I like using the word Antiquitech more so, because everybody's kind of looking at it like, oh yeah, the Tartarians, and that's why we had electricity and flying airships and whatever. And I'm saying, no, I think that was a technological standard of that world, right? Like the automobile, right? The automobile exists in every planet. Archaeologists in 200, 300, 400 years after the automobile is done are going to find automobile scraps, or remnants of it, pictures of them, these marvelous wonders. And imagine if you thought the entire world was one empire because you kept seeing the Ford logo or the Mitsubishi logo in every part of the world or something like that, as a massive misunderstanding of why this stuff was out there and who was in control. I think it was a technological standard of that period that was shared by both the Ottomans, the Holy Roman Empire, and the Mongols. So you basically have three empires being ruled by the Muslims, the Christian Catholics, and Lamist Buddhism. Because guess what? I looked into it, and so like Mongolia started out as kind of like a more shamanic pagan kind of culture, and then at the same time that the Mongolian Republic was turning into a Mongolian Empire and the first Khan was appointed, they took Buddhism, which was sharing with everybody, and they kind of standardized Buddhism in throughout the whole realm, and that kind of upgraded it. And if I'm trying to remember, I covered it in a video. I'm trying to remember exactly how I found it all. But then they put in the whole Dalai Lama system, after that. So the Dalai Lama could be holding similar secrets that the Pope does in the Vatican, and if the Islamic world has any kind of an equivalency. And so one of these is of three empires. That's the odd man out, because it's Buddhist, which is a different kind of oneness, where you've got the monotheism in the West and in the Middle East, and then you've got a Buddhist system with nirvana and all that stuff going on in the East. And if you're talking about something that's still rooted with things in Buddhism, they're going to have their own personal understanding of the ether and things like that. So I definitely believe that they were a major contributor to what would be eventually the technology lost and commissioned by Tesla to rediscover. Not invent, but rediscover.
Well, I have to say your take is it's far different than anyone I've read so far. And, that to me, it's because so far I'm not convinced that anyone knows, other than the fact that the thing that I find a mystery is, particularly if you look at these world expositions, there was clearly a knowledge that was known. They had the ability to construct buildings, huge buildings, in remarkably fast time, and apparently with minimum human labor. There are others who have studied this and said that we have found ancient architecture that exists today in the buildings, that there are some that are still around. There's remnants of others that showed advanced understanding of architectural knowledge that we don't have today. We have actually regressed in, architecturally, in design, in creativity. But then again, if this was a kingdom, as some speculate, it appears it was in Russia, China, this whole region over there, and that stretched into North America. The destruction of the giant bones by the Smithsonian, we know that the giants, they populated North America. And so I'm still with this gap, and then it gets into this whole thing that, well, is this part of the Mandela effect? I was at a place yesterday and got into a discussion with a group of people because they started freaking out when they began to realize the Twilight Zone wasn't what it was anymore. The Wizard of Oz isn't here anymore the way it was. A number of other things. And then I'm thinking, all right, so if we're experiencing these altered memories, could this be as well what we're experiencing when our complete culture of people are concerned?
Yeah, in a sense. One of the funny things that it reminded me of, and it's very funny because, of course, this was an Alec Baldwin movie, but if people remember the movie based on the radio play of The Shadow, in that movie, that is kind of a Tartarian movie, because I think the main villain was from the Mongolian region or something like that, right? Tibet, maybe. I think it was maybe Tibetan. There was Eastern mysticism involved in the shadow disciplines that the Shadow character worked with. And there was a mind cloud ability, a psychic ability that they trained as monks up in the mountains as part of that story. And there was an old building that everybody in the city remembered had been demolished, but it was actually an illusion. And that's where the enemies, the main character was plotting his major event, his major plan. That was the whole bit of the film. And you would never find the place because it was clouded from your mind's eye, an obfuscation in psychic terms. And so, we're looking at a world that was swept under the dirt, literally, because I've always remembered as a kid, the thing that they hook you in on Mudflood to Tartaria with, which is the buildings that have a foundation that is not properly placed, and that you've got windows below ground and doors.
Yeah, you got doors leading to stairways that are underground.
Exactly.
I mean, sure.
Exactly. So,
maybe that's a style. Maybe that's opening up a vortex that we completely have missed. I don't know.
Yeah, that's not like Mandela effect to me, right? Like I got a friend who's already thinking that like something as recent as 15 days to slow the what was actually just 2 weeks, but I remember it always as 15. It was always 15. I commented to myself, it's very odd that it's 2 weeks plus a day. Why they round it? Why didn't they just round it up to 3 weeks if they were going to bother to do 2 weeks?
Because most people get paid twice a month,
right. There's that too. Exactly. Yeah. We all know that there's
it's the whole thing about
there, right?
It's
but no, it's so if it's a literal timeline shift, then I'm from the 15 days timeline, just to let y'all know.
I'm still trying to figure out where the hell we're at. I mean, and not maybe because I'm a little older, I have a different perspective on how I see things. But I again, getting back to your point, the Mongolians. Now, growing up for me, if you were a Mongoloid, it meant that you were somehow retarded. Somehow, you were not like the rest of us. And I can remember as a kid, I had more fear, I think, of the Chinese, the Mongolians. When you see Genghis Khan, I mean, it's almost. So I don't know if that's purposely how the system taught us to view that culture, that part of the world, because if you view it as your enemy, as a demon, you're not going to go down that road.
Exactly. The video I did called Tartarian History Gaps was when I first like really like cracked open what's the deal with um with Tartary slash Mongolia. Let's see if I can find evidence of Tartaria and in Mongolian history. And as I'm looking at, the Mongolian history, I'm cross-referencing a few different places, and I'm noticing that the entire history of Mongolia, there's like this is a giant massive empire with resources and entire in like apparently all they had was an army of horse lords and political intrigue and a little bit of infrastructure development in what would be known as cities and some very grand temples.
I thought they were nomadic.
Standing, and I'm just like, that's it. That's the only thing this empire did in its like 2,000 years of reign or whatever.
Just riding around on horses.
Just riding around on horses, conquering other people that were doing other things, but just not being as mighty as the horse lords over there. Right. So I'm sitting there and I'm just like, where's the internal story? Like nobody wrote a book of note in Tartaria. Nobody, nobody reinvented the irrigation system in some way that got then adopted by someone else or stole the idea in another, region of the world or something like that. Like nothing. It's all just like war and imperial politics. And that's everything you get from a Mongolian history book and from a Mongolian tourist website and official government websites as far as any of the Mongolian imperial history of the peoples. So that's all.
I remember John Wayne playing Genghis Khan.
John Wayne did?
Yeah, he actually did. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are theories out there that, that Mongolians as a fan of a lot of different people like Robert Sepper, now the name of a people that nobody talks about called the Scythians is on the tips of a lot of alternative history people's tongues as they're looking at things, especially development in the early ages and things like that. And so there's a possibility that the Mongolian leaders may have been more white, right? And then that goes into all sorts of things that people, don't like to imply, and that I'm certainly not implying about like some white destiny or something like that. I don't know. I don't care. It's not my people.
Actually, he did. They tried to make him up like a Chinese, and it was hilarious. I mean, yeah.
I got right here. You'll find this very, very fascinating. This is an excerpt that I'm grabbing this from a site called historyofyesterday.com that was talking about Tartaria because I needed to find this from after the first time I read it. And this is the only part of this of a 1957 commissioned and then declassified in 1998 CIA document from analysts that were working in Asia. And it says this about Tartar. Or let us take the matter of history, which along with religion, language, and literature constitute the core of a people's cultural heritage. Here again, the communists have interfered in a shameless manner. For example, on the 9th of August, 1944, the Central Committee of the Communist Party, sitting in Moscow, issued a directive ordering the party's Tartar Provincial Committee to proceed to a scientific revision of the history of Tartaria. A scientific revision.
A scientific revision.
Yeah, right there. That's already telling you something. So scientific revision of history of Tartaria to liquidate serious shortcomings and mistakes of a nationalistic character committed by individual writers and historians in dealing with Tartar history. In other words, Tartar history was to be rewritten. Let us be frank, was to be falsified in order to eliminate references to great Russian aggression and to hide the facts of the real course of Tartar-Russian relations. And this was not isolated case. In every Muslim area within the USSR, historians on orders of the Communist Party have rewritten history to distort the facts so that the Russians appear always in a good light. Needless to say, histories which present the facts truthfully have been withdrawn and destroyed so that the present and future generations of Muslims are forever denied the chance of learning the facts of their nation's past. So this is a CIA document that was not released till 1998, and then nobody cared about this excerpt until Tartaria became actually realized in our circles.
So is the analyst saying that, are they a political party or are they an ethnic party?
No, they're saying they're an ethnic party.
Okay.
But it's the communists. This is this part of Mongolia is in the Soviet Union at this point as a part of Asia. And so the communists are doing their thing. And there was a lot of eugenics practiced in the Soviet Union, especially on, various people in the more rural areas. And, they've been making all sorts of choices because of, rationing of food, because, communism doesn't ration appropriately, because it tries to give everybody equal portions, except for the leaders who are more equal than others, as it always goes with communist systems.
So are they saying that the Tartarian party, the Tartars, were they communist?
No. The communism was coming in, and it was erasing their history, right? It's the same way that like the new left is coming in and they're trying to erase all sorts of things to make demonize certain people, and try to make angels out of Che Guevara and whatnot, right? Like it's atypical propaganda, right? Because the CIA is mostly looking at what the Soviet Union is doing and what it's doing to these peoples, right?
Someone just wrote that Putin gave recognition to the Tartarians.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. Yeah, Putin's an interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
So how do we draw then a conclusion? Because this is what I find interesting. All right. So there seems to be a recognition that someone existed, a culture. I don't know, I don't know if it was ethnic. I don't know if it was political, but there was this culture. I'm kind of lost from a Western perspective because I'm trying to put these people into perspective. All right, I get where Russia's at. I get that. I get where, Mongolians at, and then I get where China's at. And then I get where India's at down under here. Every one of those others I've read about, studied about, never heard these Tartarians or where the
Mongolian Empire was the first of the three to fall, as as we know, right? It's the Mongolian Empire basically fell in the 1600s, and then the Ottoman Empire fell due to foolishly getting involved in World War I when they didn't need to, and you can thank the Young Turks for that. And of course, the Holy Roman Empire, it's kind of just relegated to what governments hold churches still in high regards and who's still king making, and this sort of thing, right? So the Holy Roman Empire, as it still exists today, seems to be the only institution left that's got any level of direct continuity, because the Ottoman Empire is gone and the Mongolian / Tartary Empire is gone. And so it's whoever was keeping those kinds of records.
Well, my studies, there is a book out there I've made reference called In the Search for the Historical Jesus by Dr. Capps. He did a great job. I mean, it's a hell of a book. But in his research, he found that the Holy Seas, and that's the thing that the Vatican is really known by in the world legally, is the Holy Seas, and that is SEAS. But anyway, it is said that they started the Muslim religion. They started it started seeding it in the late 5th century, and the rest is history. Why did I freeze up?
I don't know. I caught you on all of that. So the Tartarians started the Muslim faith. You're saying.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, why have I froze up? Am I still freezing up?
I think your voice is fine. Looks like your video actually is freezing up a tiny bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
I see
says
that
it's an
now.
excellent connection, but I don't understand why I am freezing up. Well, there you go. What's up with that, folks? Let's see.
Mm.
Let's see.
So
Okay.
I think the thing that matters, right? Because we're looking at this all here is one of the things that has been the most recent point that I have looked at is that I think, and this is mostly a working theory that involves what happened with the with with where the destruction came from, right? Because I think that the American Revolution is tied to more global events than we think, right? And I think that a lot of it is kicking off based on changes that were happening in England, because starting in the 1600s, the worshipful fuelers, they got really strong inroads with the crown and the parliament in England, that then culminated in them repairing London after the Great Fire in 1666, which is a very important event in where the globalists are coming from. Yes. What you doing, buddy? Up here. Up there. There you go. All right. You still with me? You still with me, Wayne?
Yeah, it's obviously that the camera is kind of
screen,
froze up
your
here.
screen froze, but like maybe try turning off and turning the camera back on. See if that.
I've done that already, and it's.
Oh, geez, I'm sorry. All right, shall I continue? Because they can hear you, and they can. I think they can see and hear me. All right, we'll okay. So we'll let Wayne troubleshoot that, and I think that's what he's going to do.
I'm doing my best. It apparently is not going to come back on, so I have no idea why. Well, it's all right.
That's it must be StreamYard.
Must be. Yeah, it's that's the first time I've ever experienced that. So yeah. Anyway, well, we'll just do it. I don't need to be in on the picture front, so
okay.
Let's just continue on.
All right, no worries. So what I think happened, right? Because especially for the West had a certain uniformity to certain aesthetics, with a few things borrowed that you would get from like Eastern or Middle Eastern that you would also see. But you are getting a whole lot that's coming out of something that's straight up a neoclassical style architecture and everything else, right? So I think that going all the way back, that they didn't tell us the true mission of the colonies, going back to when things were originally established in the 1600s, I think, by Jamestown, or who knows, maybe even a little bit earlier than that, right? And so I think that the reason why we've got all these cities and everything else is that there was a huge building project that went on, and I think that the indigenous persons were the laborers here, and I think that the Native Americans, when they were still of great number, before various things dwindled their population, that they had been hired or possibly somewhat, possibly enslaved. I'm not 100% sure, because things are kind of weird and interesting in that realm. And that they went, and all of these major like buildings that would be like the center of the city in all these respects, these great works and whatever their original purpose was built during that time. And then when the American Revolution happened, people that are closer to the continuity of us as we know each other now, they got to inherit what was being commissioned and built by those who run those companies, and whichever crown had commissioned them, because most of these companies out there are all commissioned by, they're either commissioned by King George or whatever, like the Virginia Company, had its thing, had its mission. And I think that secretly, and I think this is where the Freemasons come in. It's that this is that free Masonic world being built. I've read Manly P. Hall's Secret Destiny of America, and I suspect that by the American Revolution, if not the American Civil War, that we may have temporarily achieved something that looked like that. And that's why you see all of this kind of grandiose architecture in the way that they did. And also, I'd imagine that our constitutional republic may have worked a little bit differently than what we merely imagine from the written records. And then you will always have things. You'll have a parallel society, because you'll have a technologically advanced society living in the city, and then you'll have people living out in the country that'll have nothing to do with it. So you can go look at the 1830s and you can go see depictions of the Wild West and assume that that was the technological standard, when they're not showing you airships and steam engines in New York City in its antiquitech splendor, because we hadn't had a full decline yet in our architectural and engineering abilities that then would get rediscovered after the Civil War during Reconstruction by the various quote unquote robber barons, which then leads you to Trump's uncle, who allegedly has all those paperworks and connection to that level of tradition going back, right? And so I think that is a big part of what happened here, is that all this stuff is not as old as you think, but it definitely was built earlier than they say, especially because they all say that all this stuff was built during a time where anybody could have photographed it. Look at this grand building being made. It's beautiful. It's huge. It's important. It's going to serve a social function or something like that. Nobody is documenting it being built slowly over time, like once a week, come in and take a progress picture. Photographs were maybe expensive because it was new technology, but not that expensive. They could have taken a picture of a construction site, but you don't see pictures of construction sites at all.
No, you don't. You don't even see it. And the whole thing about, and your hypothesis listening, and I'm sitting here going, all right, I can see how you're trying to put the things together, but there's a huge gap and it's time. There's no accuracy of dates. I mean, we talk about the Civil War. If you go with the line of thought that there was two societies going on, well, that's a problem, because it still gets down to then what happened to them. It's like, what happened to, I don't know if it was a culture, if it was a knowledge, and whether it was Freemasonry, whether it was the Illuminati, whether it was something else that took over the quote unquote structure of society, its rules, its laws, there's still this gap. I mean, if they're using Tesla technology,
1,000 years, the millennial gap. That's right.
Well, some people say that we're actually living in the post-apocalypse. I don't know. I mean, it's pretty screwed up out there, but it's obvious that there has been something that's happened on a global scale. A prior reset is what I've written in my notes. There seems to have been a prior, because you use the term in the Civil War, the Reconstruction period.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if the Civil War was a cover for merely the fact of an invading army coming in and wiping out a complete culture and society, replacing it with its own?
That's entirely possible, because one of the things I learned about Civil War history was that the Civil War was connected to global events also. It had a major effect. And it's a lesser known fact that the Tsar of Russia, who at this point would have been tied to the Mongolians because of how Mongolia was, the Mongolian Empire was relating to the Tsars of Russia and everything else, that they were going to come in on the side of the Union if the Union was going to struggle for too long to come in. And we all know that the British was trying to come in on the side of the Confederacy, and that's why they had the blockade. And by the way, you could almost say this is a Mandela effect. I was looking up some stuff about the ironclads, because I was trying to remember the name of the ironclads, which was the USS Monitor,
down in the Monitor and the Merrimack. I think it was the Monitor, that was actually sunk.
The Merrimack used to be the Virginia, and then they scrapped it and gave it the hull, the iron hull. And then I'm looking around, and apparently there were, like, I thought there were only 2 of these early battleships, if you will. And apparently there were like 6 to 8 of them. There were a couple for each side. It wasn't just the 2 fighting.
The Confederates had some?
Well, the Confederates had the Merrimack, and the North had the Monitor, and these 2 went to war with each other, and the Monitor won because it was nearly impossible to hit, because it was practically the first U-boat. You know, it didn't go submersible, but only about 10% of it was above water, which was the cannon, and then the rest of it was underwater. It was basically a cannon floating on top of a U-boat. And that was the USS Monitor. Go look it up.
There were 8 of them in the supposed fleet, huh?
Something like that. There were a couple of them. I was reading an article. It's like, oh, I never heard of this one and that one. I didn't know that. I thought it was just those 2. And then later on, they would, by the time you were getting to like the Spanish-American War, that's when you started seeing more battleship proper, right?
Can we stop there in a second as well? Because, the thing about it is, if you look at the American history, it's really accentuated by consistent wars. It's from the very beginning, when they say of our founding declaration. You had the Spanish and American War. I mean, you had we fought the French, we fought the British, we fought the Spanish, and I'm thinking to myself, now wait a minute. What if this wasn't so much a government, that it was basically a takeover of the entire culture of the known world? I know it seems extreme, but I've questioned the Civil War.
We're living under a global pandemic that has changed the culture of the entire world.
Completely.
So, no, it's not preposterous at all.
It's altered a generation now.
Yes,
that's
precisely.
What's so. Yeah,
right.
They're going to be psychically imprinted with whatever you want to title this thing to be. And so I'm going back, and here's the interesting thing is, as I continue to read, we're going to get more into this book here, this word magic, is the fact of this. The United States is set up not as a constitutional government. There's actually 3 constitutions. There's one of the people, there's one of the maritime, and there's one of commerce. We are a nation that is under admiralty law. We have been since almost from the beginning. And there are 3 different world courts in which each one of these play a role in. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, you've got the vast majority of Americans thinking that we're a democracy. I mean, we really think we're a democracy. We're not. So using your parallel, Steve, I see 2 parallel societies running here. I see one that really knows what the fuck's going on, and I see the other one who's just absolutely they're ignorant. And that's what the vast majority of people are. They're ignorant. They think that they're so aware and alive, but they don't even realize they're living under a form of this is not even a government, because government actually means to control your mind.
Right.
That's what government means.
Yeah, exactly.
So, well, why couldn't it have happened 100 years ago? You could have wiped out their whole history, and today we would be no wiser for it. We may have found a Ford emblem and gone.
Yeah,
They're
I
all
believe
bored.
you've seen the pictures of pre-World War One Berlin, pre-World War One Paris. These places these places were beautiful. This architecture was something else. It was somewhat like Greco-Roman like esque, like with all the curved stonework and everything else. And then everything started to look much more on the postmodern side when they were rebuilding after these various wars had bombed their various capitals and destroyed all the stuff
Obliterated them.
not built on the issues they were fighting about.
It's like, man, the carpet bomb, that doesn't even describe what they did. It was like they purposely pulverized it.
Right, right. Exactly.
I'm
And
talking
like
about
these
the
are big.
Allied.
Like if you've watched videos or seen the pictures or whatever of some of these buildings that they were destroying, like they were going to be demolished, some of these old mud flood buildings, and it takes them like a week with like wrecking balls and stuff to like break it down. And like they're not using explosives at that time or whatever, but like you're looking at it and it's just like these buildings, they had to get hit really, really hard to take them down. The kind of stonework that was being used was so solid and fixed in, right? I mean, what I think was it's the only thing that makes sense to me is that they had some sort of sound weapon technology that was causing the liquefaction, and because like it seems somewhat like it was everywhere. The New Madrid quake is always pointed at as something significant, right? And so, like, I think that the whole deal was because that was all stuff that happened. I think New Madrid happened around the same time as the War of 1812, if I remember. So
Yeah.
think about that. That's another war, and then there happens to be an event that they downplay as saying the craziest thing that happened in that event was a river ran backwards. Well, a river running backwards is certainly going to cause flooding and extra mud. That's for one thing. And there's all sorts of water tributaries and stuff like that, right? So if there's a war between the Mongolian Empire, which that's what I think it was. I think that the Holy Roman Empire and the Ottomans, I think they had a big problem with something going on with the Mongolians, and so I almost want to say that perhaps those two teamed up and they got into a war, and it hurt on both sides. It was a pretty bad war that went on like either during the 1700s or the 1800s, and this could also explain the orphan trains because hey son, you're drafted, right? This is just like all sorts of mandates, right? Hey, let's go listen to our mandates. But I mean, it's a war if something's happening on your soil or what have you, right? And instead of doing a whole lot of invasion, they were using sound weapons to cause the liquefaction earthquakes, which is why you can see certain concentrations of devastation in cities or areas of a city that then have to get dug up in the pictures that you see later. Or sometimes you'll notice it looks kind of mud floody in a place that doesn't look like it was ever that particularly important. But if there was fighting or something to fight over that isn't there anymore, then that may explain why you're seeing evidence of mud flood in some weird random town where it doesn't make any sense. Or some other type of area that is perhaps never was very populated at all. It could have been the site of like a military base. You don't know. And
Some say they actually were using direct energy weapons back in those days, which if they had Tesla technology,
right.
It seems very easily. I mean, as I'm reading some of these world expositions, that's what they were actually using was Tesla's technology to power it. Where, and if that was the case 150, 170 years ago, we should have already been using photon technology by now. I don't know.
Right, exactly. And so I think a lot of the I think a lot of the UFO sightings and things like that, especially where the official narrative is reverse engineered from aliens or something like that. Like I said, I think that was all part of this agenda, because if they had legitimate like airships, right?
Yeah.
Now you talk about extra highly advanced airship type of technology, especially when you start getting into some of the more physics bendings, play around with the ether, if you will. Yeah, you're talking about something that's going to behave exactly like all of the anti-gravity aircraft, the UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon, that keeps getting spotted, whether it's the Tic Tac or the little Corvette, the shovel-nosed craft, the TR-3B, all these usual suspects, right?
And that makes me believe that they
Yeah,
may not be
yeah,
aliens at all. It may be, in fact,
yeah,
that we've been living under under the authoritarian
yeah.
thumb of, I don't know if it's human. I don't know.
H.G. Wells did all this stuff, actually. H.G. Wells, like, there's Antiquitech disclosure in all those books, 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea and stuff. 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea, a captain with advanced technological power seizes control of all maritime activity, right? With his submarine, with his nuclear power submarine that has torpedoes and things, and can summon krakens. He can like destroy Navy fleets and stuff like that, right? Then
I love this stuff. I mean,
H.G. Wells made another story, which was made into a movie starring Vincent Price, which was actually pretty good. I think it was made in the early 60s, which was the same thing, except an airship captain. And so we had an airship, and it was basically like a helicarrier from the Avengers, this damn thing. And he was a globalist. His ideals were globalism, in that he would cause world peace by using his airship to blackmail or threaten every single government in the world into doing his will, and establishing a communist.
now you're talking Thanos.
This was an H.G. Wells story I saw in a 1960s.
Yeah, I remember it. Yeah, yeah. I remember the movie.
Yeah. So now you do your alien invasion instead, and you have a man disguised, through an alien using Hollywood magic, telling you, to have world peace and become vegan and all these stupid little things, right? So, this was H.G. Wells telling you this is what they plan to do when you forget about Antiquitech, and then they bring it back.
Isn't it interesting, Steve, when you think about War of the Worlds? And I love the rendition that Tom Cruise did, but what was the basis of War of the Worlds? It was a virus. It was the virus that was here in this earth that killed the aliens. It was about a virus, and we're living that, in a sense, kind of the H.G. Wells story itself today.
Right, exactly. And people are wondering, like, okay, this was a really big psyop that they pulled off in 2020. Is 2021 and 2021? So now that this seems to be failing because they've reached maximum compliance capacity or something, are they about to do the next big thing? I don't know if they're going to do the next big thing.
I don't know about that. I
don't know. Like, I guarantee you they're going to do something like, every 9 years something happens, and then every 18 years something bigger happens, right? Why? That's astrology. The North Node has an 18-year transit cycle, roughly, and so every 9 years you hit a certain kind of karmic return when you're lined up with your K2, right? So North Node is going to be every 9 years you're going to have like a minor society changing sudden event, and then every 18 years something more major, right? It was approximately 18 years between our mindsets about 9/11 and our mindsets about COVID, and then in between that you had the financial reset that came in around the beginning of the Obama administration, right? So the financial issue with the housing crisis was the mini one that really hurt the economy in a big way, but didn't super shock the whole system like the way 9/11 did, like the way 2020 did. And then 20 years before that, one could maybe say there was the big financial collapse, the big crash that happened then. And there's a continuity of roughly every 18 years. You can look and see a major milestone, and then a shorter milestone, and then another big milestone every 9 years.
Well, whatever they see, Shawnee says, do I think it's closer to the biblical time period, or was the mud flood something? Let me get that right. Do you think we are closer to the biblical time period or the mud flood of the same great flood on this side of the world?
Well, I do believe that it is 2022 and that it's not 1022. Okay. So I don't think that we're missing 1,000 years of history. I mean, we're missing 1,000 years of history, but it was there was a washover of what we now know as the Middle Ages, Dark Ages period. I do believe that there was some sort of washover in that respect, because, like I said, you've got specifically the Mongolian Empire having a terrible account of its history, because I don't believe that that tells us anything. Like, there's no way your empire was that big, around for that long, and the only thing you were interested in was military conquest and power gaming the throne, right?
Yeah.
No, right? That's just there to make you not understand what was really at stake by the point that the Mongolian Empire had been gutted and its records taken and kept by other officials that were like on their way out with like the last administration kind of situation. Long story short is that I think that the reason why that 1,000-year period is blotted out is because it was of issue when this tripart war between these three empires happened that caused the mud flood and subsequently the orphan trains, right? Because the orphan, like, when you look at the orphan trains, I'm still haven't figured out exactly what's going on with all of those orphan trains. That I'm not sure of yet. But that's why I got the war theory running through my head, because something had to happen that specifically targeted the men and then had to obviously target the women in somewhat of a different way as we try to put the story together. And there could also be a lot of human failings going on. You know, there could have been rampant diseases from behavior or whatever, like the baby's an incubator thing, like all this stuff, right? I'm not sure.
I'm not either. It continues to go on. Well, Steve, this is not going to let me come on anymore. So it's almost top of the hour anyway.
Yeah.
Is this I'll have to find out from Stream. Is this an issue that they have? It's rather irritating. Works good in radio, but doesn't work so well in the video arena. Well, Steve, this has been interesting. I left a link to some of your videos down in the description.
Yeah, cool.
And check them out, folks. I mean, I'm going to have you back on because it's the other thing is these asylums and the orphans that as you get more into that one is one that something went on, something happened.
We have a specific ancestral memory with like the orphan origin story. And that's evident in the tales of Charles Dickens and everything else. The unparenting of people, perhaps because of so many wars, but also it seems like it's just such a massive aspect of the population, and that literally could be because of wars. And other circumstances. Quite easily.
You're right, but we don't have them today, do we?
That's right. We don't. Some of those buildings are still there, and those orphanages were like freaking Hogwarts, and Hogwarts is a Tartaria building. That's for sure.
I know if you ever go exploring some of those, I've done one, and a lot of energy. Steve, man, I appreciate it, brother. I'm just going to speak favor over you, and just
thank you.
Just find that there is a brighter day upon you.
For sure. And if I can encourage people, I have a radio show on TFR Live now. I was made an offer and I liked the offer, so I went with it. So if you tune in tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern time on tfrlive.com, I have a show called Trigenesis. And I should have a guest on tonight. My friends Corey and Alicia from the Phoenix Enigma. They said they'd come on. I'm still making sure that that's all going down and that the subject matter is right, because they've got a wealth of information too. So just tune into me, tfrlive.com, 9 p.m. Eastern.
Send me the link and I'll help promote that for you.
I will.
Yeah, send me the link and I'll definitely put it in. And good success with that, my friend.
Thank you.
Radio is it's and particularly if it's uncensored, uncensored platform, you can get so much more communication. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, we've got a lot of free range.
Yes, I like that.
Copyright things you can't do, but and basic vulgarities, but all the topics are on the money. Yeah.
And today vulgarity I guess it's relative, because when you have shows like Yellowstone, vulgarities are out the windows. I mean,
right, exactly. And I don't need that much vulgarity. I throw it out there once in a while for impact. Otherwise,
it's color commentary.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, you're not against color, are you?
I paint with the rainbow. So, all right, Steve, man, appreciate you. Thank you, everyone. Y'all are the best. And sorry about the video thing, but hey,
it was a great show. It was a great show.
It was fabulous. I mean, we covered the gamut. Anyway, my friend, appreciate you. We'll get you back on again, because I want to talk about these orphans and the asylums.
Absolutely. I still have to do a little bit of work on that myself, but we'll be there.
Yeah. All right, brother. Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye.